afternoon, and welcome to Online with the Parent Connection. My name is Dr. Gail Harris, and I'm the Executive Director of the Parent Connection. And today I'm just delighted to have as our guest Dr. Ann Presley. Welcome, Ann.
Thank you, Gail.
Ann is going to be teaching a class for us at the Parent Connection on grandparenting. And we're going to be talking about that in just a few minutes.
Right.
To start out with, I'd like to remind our viewers that this is a call-in show. And they might call in with questions for you, Ann, or questions for me. And our number here for call-in is 629-0683 or 629-0708. So we'll be with you for the next 25 minutes talking about grandparenting. And again, our guest today is Dr. Ann Presley. So I'd like to start with Ann. We understand that you've just received your doctorate both in nursing and psychology at the age of 80 at the University of Arizona, which is just an incredible accomplishment, and congratulations to you.
Thank you, Gail.
And what was the motivating force that compelled you to go back to school?
Well, it was a natural for me because that's been the pattern of my life. I graduated in a diploma school of nursing back in 1934.
Wow.
And soon after that, I managed to go to George Peabody College for Teachers for a special course in public health nursing. That was during the Depression, 1937, long before your time. But I was lucky. I got one of the first scholarships, the Social Security awarded to nursing. And that took me all the way through. After that, I married, had children, and then after my husband died in 1962, I went right back to school at the university. Well, it's after my 3 children were in college and my little daughter was still in junior high. I went back to school at the University of Arizona and got my BS degree in nursing. And following that, I was off to University of Colorado to get my master's in science in community health nursing. And I got that degree on the day that I was 60 years old. And then right after that, I was working for the Department of Defense, and I got a wonderful opportunity to get another master's in Master of Public Administration. Well, that just took me right on through, and I enjoyed my work with them. But there was a time for, they call it retirement. I don't really use that word. But I did leave them and moved to Tucson. And it was so natural for me to get in the School of Nursing, the graduate school. But here I was. I didn't even think about it. I was age 73. And I just expected me to go ahead and register. But I had to go through pretty much of a critique before I got through. They reviewed all of my back records. I guess they don't usually have students to enter at 73.
I would bet that's probably true, Ann.
I figured that out soon afterward. But sure enough, I went down as just an inquiring person and came home a student. And I'm so glad I did, because the last 7 years have been nothing but a challenge and a joy for me. But it was hard. It wasn't easy. But that's the way I am. I work at something till I finish it.
Well, I think that's really inspirational to know that you have as an example of saying that maybe you're never too old to learn something.
Never, never.
And I think that has a real important implications for the grandparenting class that you're teaching. So now with your doctorate in nursing and psychology, what you've chosen to focus on is grandparenting.
Right.
And why is that?
I believe that grandparents can make a difference in today's society. And I also believe that they are eager to learn, because from the pilot class that I taught, which graduated in March the 22nd, these people have far exceeded my expectation of them. Let me tell you about one. A 54-year-old grandmother called me and told me that she was so inspired by going through that 8 weeks course that she has already registered at Pima College for next year's course in early child development.
Oh, that's great.
But she's going on. She's not stopping there. She's going to transfer to the University of Arizona and get a degree in early childhood development, and she is planning a teaching career, and she's going to make it.
So what Ann's talking about is the fact that she's going to be teaching an 8-week course at the Parent Connection, but the introduction to that course is going to be a one-evening seminar that we have, and for those of you that are interested in signing up for that, we're going to show some information on the screen for you right now, so you can jot this down so you don't miss it. This is Ann Presley's course called The Wisdom of Grandparents, How to Share It with Your Family. And it's going to be held Wednesday, December 14th at the Parent Connection from 6:30 to 8 p.m. Our suggested fee is $5 a family, but as with all of our programs, no one will be turned away for lack of ability to pay. For reservations and for reservations for childcare, we ask you to call 321-1500, and that will be held at the Parent Connection at 1010 North Alvernon. So if you're interested, as we continue our discussion today in finding out more about the course that Dr. Presley is going to be teaching, call the Parent Connection or call us here today on our call-in numbers 629-0683 or 629-0708. Again, I want to remind our viewers that this is Gail Harris with Online with the Parent Connection, and our special guest today is Dr. Ann Presley, who's going to be teaching a course for us called The Wisdom of Grandparenting. So tell me something. You talk about grandparents and the important resource that they are to families. Talk more about that, Ann. What do grandparents have to offer families?
They have a lot that they've never had before. Used to be in the early days that grandparents learned how to grandparent from their grandparents, but society is different. There's nothing about it the same. Even the grandchildren are different. Let me explain a little about that. Today, they wear baggy clothes, and they have strange haircuts, and they use language that we have to have it interpreted before we really understand what they're saying. And not only, but the discipline problems that they had back in the early days at school were throwing wads and paper wads, and running in the hall, and teasing the little girls, things like that. Now, you know it's different. You read in every day's paper about the violence that erupts because of children.
What can a grandparent do, Ann?
They can start that child early from birth if they're lucky, and teach that child from birth through teenage years. Many, many, many valuable lessons for life.
Now, why is a grandparent important as opposed to the parent? I mean, I hear some people say, well, that's the parent's job.
You bet it is. But now, I told you society is different. It takes both parents working to make a living. And many parents depend upon grandparents to supervise their children just to be sure that they're safe. Also, grandparents have unconditional love for the grandchild, and they're natural to teach that child. But there's a little problem, you know. Parents sometimes get worried about somebody else teaching their children. And to avoid that, I've developed a model contract that the grandparent can use to present to the parent beforehand to assure this parent that these are the boundaries within which I will teach that child. And it will absolutely be the same that the parent wants for the child.
It sounds like a very respectful way of the grandparent acknowledging the important role that the parent has to play,
Oh, they do.
but vice versa, that the parents also have an opportunity to acknowledge the important role that the grandparent has to play.
Yes. Now, if this grandparent puts something in that contract that the parent doesn't agree with, out it goes, because the parent is in charge. And I make it very clear that this is the most important thing that the grandparent does before they get started. And it's so nice to have a clear understanding about what is to be taught. How would you feel if you were leaving your child with a grandparent that you really didn't know too well because you may be an in-law, and expect them to teach your child? You'd be really uncomfortable. I think it's right to do this. I wouldn't want someone teaching my child that I didn't know what their philosophy is and what they're teaching.
And I can imagine from experience that this may be very touchy in some families.
Oh, yes, because, there's some underlying subconscious feelings from even children to their parents that have been festering for years. But really, this is a time to cement relations and make the intergenerational bond strong.
And it's not just in the 90s that the idea of the extended family and grandparents being involved with grandchildren is something that's been with us throughout society, has it not, Ann?
It has, but they've had their problems. That's why when Social Security was first introduced, what did the grandparent do was to move out of the home, and because conflict starts when there are too many in a little space. I think it was a good movement, but nevertheless, we need the wisdom of a grandparent if they do have unconditional love for that particular child, because there's nothing better than having someone who loves that child be the one to nurture it and train it. And that's while the parent is gone.
I know that when I was raising my boys, and at that time as a single parent, my mother,
Yes.
the boy's grandmother, was very much involved, but there used to be conflicts. Like one thing, I would have her babysitting and I'd come home and she would have given them a haircut.
That's right.
And that wasn't something that I really wanted her to do.
That's right.
So, well, what I hear you saying is those are the kind of things that this contract may
Yes.
clarify.
I live by contracts. Even before I married, way back, over 55 years ago, I contracted with that husband-to-be. And of course, we both got what we wanted out of the marriage.
Well, Ann, tell me specifically then, what kind of topics are you going to include in your course?
Oh, Gail, it's just a 16-hour. I wish it could have been 40, because you have to let some things go. But since there's so many, just let me review a few of
Okay,
these.
great.
And, I could talk about each one, but it's so much time. In that parent contract is first and foremost. And then I like to tell the grandparents in what ways that grandchild is unique and why is he different, and explain that he's only on this earth for a short period of time in the care of parents to learn. That's all he's here for, is to learn. And there are so many missed opportunities to teach that child. A lot of parents don't even know that that's their responsibility. They treat them like they wish they had never been born and things like that. And that's the most damaging thing for a child. I won't get into the detail, but believe you me, I do stress the uniqueness of each individual.
And the opportunity to know those teachable moments.
Oh, yes, grasp them. Be alert to those, and then make some, and always be a role model for that child. That child learns by just watching. They're so smart, and they pick up. They look at your voice, the tone of your voice, and how you react to people. Child is learning every minute, and what you want to do, what you would want to do as a grandparent, is to give that child the very best that you have in every way.
So grandparents, you're going to be teaching somewhat about being a role model as a grandparent?
Oh, yes. that will be part of it. And also, I want to talk about the importance of discipline. But my definition of discipline is different from...
What is your definition, Ann?
Okay, it's to teach. Teach. That is the way you teach a child. Because when you whip a child, you're teaching him, but you're teaching him to hit. And you'll teach him balance, because this is what he hears and he sees.
Do you have a lot of grandparents, though, who say, well, I was whipped when I was a kid? And,
how did you know that?
well, because I hear the same thing at the Parent Connection, Ann.
Did you know I had one man to quit because he said I was whipped when I was little, and I whipped my 3 sons, and that's the only way you can make a mind. So he told me he just disagreed with my philosophy. And that's okay. People have choices. That's one thing I stress. Everybody has choices.
So we could let our viewers know that if you're looking for an alternative to whipping or to spanking in terms of discipline as a grandparent or as a parent, that this class might offer some suggestions along that line.
Yes. It does. It stresses that because that's just part of the psychological treatment of a child. Really what we're trying to do is to develop the physical, psychological, and the intellectual and the spiritual growth of a child.
Now, when you say spiritual,
yes,
tell me what you mean by that, because I think maybe some of our viewers might be confused by that.
Well, that's one of the things that's spelled out in the contract. Nothing is taught that child that that parent doesn't approve. And if that child is of a religion that isn't the current one with a lot of people, you must teach what they want taught, not what you believe, because that's the parent, and they are the ultimate responsibility for that child. But most grandparents, they have the same focus of religion. If you believe in a God or Buddha or whoever, that's the one that you must focus on.
But I think your point earlier about being a role model, that if that grandparent is living their life by spiritual principles,
yes,
whatever they are,
yes,
that's a way that you can develop that spiritual part of that grandchild.
And moral development. Do you know that little children, they're not born with morals at all. They have to be developed. And there have been a lot of psychologists deal with that subject. But nobody has ever come to the conclusion just exactly how the child gets it. But my view of that is that that child absorbs that in early childhood. For instance, the first year of life, the task of that infant is to get a view of life. If that child has been left crying and unattended and jerked around, he's going to have a bad view of life, and he'll grow up with that, including the spiritual developments. He'll be angry with children, other children. He'll mistreat other children.
You know, I'm so happy to hear you say that, Ann, because the thing that we believe in and that the Parent Foundation is founded on is that those first 5 years of life are the most important in a child's life.
You know what Hitler said? He said, you give me your child until he's age 5, and I'll give him back to you, because he's already indoctrinated him.
Just to remind our viewers, you're watching Online with the Parent Connection. I'm Dr. Gail Harris, and my guest today is Dr. Ann Presley, who's going to be teaching a special class on grandparenting at the Parent Connection in December. And we are a phone call-in show, and to remind you, our numbers are 629-0683 and 629-0708. So we have about 5 more minutes left in our show, and we'll continue to discuss the importance of grandparenting in today's society. But if you have any questions for Dr. Presley or for myself, please feel free to call in. So, Ann, let's go back. We were talking about the specific topics that you're going to be covering in your course. Okay. We talked about the spiritual development, about the importance of discipline, that grandparents be role models.
Yes.
I know that one of the things you talk about is that grandparents can provide a historical perspective to the children.
Yes, how important it is.
Talk to us about that.
Okay, it isn't an easy thing to do, so grandparents have to discipline themselves to start with it because they always put it off. But you go back, you find out your own family tree and draw the little tree with branches and name each branch, because each one is a merger of two families. And that it's quite clear when it's demonstrated in that way. But put the names of people, if they're known, and what they did, and some of their accomplishments. It's just wonderful to look back and find out that somebody's grandfather was the first one in some place that designed a invention. And somebody had to invent a lot of things early. But learning about who they were and what their accomplishments are is very interesting, and it's important because that child gains a self-importance and gets an identity right up front.
So this is real important for a sense of history,
Yes.
self-esteem,
Yeah.
identity, that even if my grandfather didn't do something exciting like inventing something, maybe he grew the best tomato plants in the
Well,
neighborhood.
that's important. Oh, all of those things that you know about and can discover yourself.
So pictures would be important too, I would imagine.
Always add as many pictures that are available, and be sure and put the dates on it, because someday these children's grandchildren will want to see all this. It's for posterity. It's so important. But let me get back. Do you mind? Just
Not
one
at
thing?
all.
When I told you that I believed in discipline, I honestly mean that. But the discipline that mine is done with love. And that was what happened back in the last 3 decades when there was permissive parenting. The psychologist said that children should explore and learn to their full extent. That was good, but they didn't put in the provision that there should be limits. And this is where we went wrong, because now this society that's violent and criminal is a result of that permissive parenting. Children should be taught that there is a consequence to misbehavior, and they should be taught as the misbehavior happens that it is something that they need to learn. And don't do it in an angry tone. Don't make them feel inferior. Be on their side. Be their friend. And don't be a critical judge, because this is the only way they're going to learn. And you need their confidence, or they'll never tell you anything. They won't communicate with you if you start in running them down and saying you should do this and do that. You just explain how it can be done and why.
When you talk about confidence, it's not only confidence for the child to have, but confidence for the parent to have, that they could get from that guidance from a wise grandparent.
Well, there are a lot of things that I encourage the grandparent to approach with the parent that will teach them some new techniques, because parents are open, and a lot of them want to know. One is for one that I like very much is the problem of money management and how to be responsible. Children aren't given, quote, allowances. There should be, I think, a weekly payday, but each payday should include tasks that the children have chosen to do each day. They can do things. They don't want to leave that to somebody else, or they'll just feel like that everybody owes them everything. And at the end of the week, check off if they accomplished those tasks in a fulfilling manner. And if they did, the payment is preset, maybe 25 cents a task. But if they didn't do it, that gets deducted. And they soon learn that really, to get an amount of money and be responsible, they must do these tasks. It's a good way to teach, and they respond to it.
We've been talking this afternoon with Dr. Ann Presley on Parent Connection Online, and Dr. Presley's been sharing some of the things that she's going to be discussing with us in our special Wisdom of the Grandparents class that's going to be held at the Parent Connection. I'd encourage you to call 321-1500 to find out about the class, to be there for that, and then to find out what future things Dr. Presley is going to be doing with us. So I would like to thank you for being with us today,
Okay.
Dr. Presley. We're out of time.
Oh, my.
This has been the Parent Connection Online, and thank you so much for being with us. You've been a wonderful guest and have a
Okay.
lot of wisdom to share with our Tucson family.
Well, yeah.
Thank you, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you, Gail.